Fill thy purse with money.
On this track, you will hear commentary by Myron Meisel. Myron Meisel.
Othello was the first of Wells's series of European productions, including Mr. Arkadin, The Trial, and Don Quixote, as well as Chimes at Midnight, that he would later characterize as his set of desperate adventures. It began partly because an Italian producer, Scalera, had broached the idea, we must make Othello together. So Othello was prepared extensively as a studio picture with Trauner. And the intention was to build a rather elaborate island of Cyprus on the Côte d'Azur in the south of France. However, when it turned out that Scalera's money was limited and dried up rather rapidly, Wells recalculated about making the film again on a low budget and working off natural locations. Once Scalera's money evaporated, Wells was left with an exciting contingent of actors and a great eagerness to proceed to make the movie. So he determined he was going to go forward with the film no matter what. This involved Wells taking a number of acting jobs expressly for the purpose of financing the continuation of Othello. The most notable of these parts was The Third Man, for Alexander Korda, which has, of course, become Wells's most popular and best identified role as Harry Lime. At first, Wells was miffed and angry that Korda would offer him an acting job after Wells had invested so much time and failed to come up with a directing project for Korda. But he realized that Othello could certainly use the money, and he held out for the very best deal he could get. However, characteristically, Wells did not end up with the best deal he could get. He was ultimately offered a choice of either $100,000 up front or a sizable piece of the picture, which sometimes he has said was 20% and at other times a third. He took the cash, primarily so that he could put it into Othello, and as a result failed to share in the amazing international success of The Third Man, which was probably at its time the most successful international film of all time. Interestingly, in the case of The Third Man, David Selznick, who had American rights to the picture, wanted to use Noel Coward instead of Orson Welles, but Korda considered Welles absolutely essential for the film. Because Welles was making a film for which he essentially did not have any money, other than what he was able to raise during hiatuses in production, Welles used at least 5 different kinds of film stock throughout the shooting of the film, nevertheless achieving a consistency of image quality that's quite extraordinary, considering that he was constantly working with stock coming out of different batches. While Orson Welles was editing Othello over the course of over a year, he took to the stage in an effort to raise additional funds to help support the completion of the production. He appeared with Suzanne Cloudier on stage, along with Hilton Edwards and Michael McLeomore, in Paris in a set of 2 one-act plays written by Welles, but this was not successful. He then devised an evening's entertainment entitled An Evening with Orson Welles, directed by Hilton Edwards, which he took on tour throughout Germany. Once again, he was not successful. At this point, Laurence Olivier invited Welles to come to London and perform for the first time on the London stage. Welles first suggested that he do Faustus, but when Olivier said he preferred a Shakespearean production, Welles decided to stage Othello. This was in 1951, and Welles made the demand that all the actors who worked with him have no prior experience of playing Shakespeare on the stage. Gudrun Muir played Desdemona opposite him, and Peter Finch was his Iago. Othello is one of the most unique films in the canon of Orson Welles' work, most importantly because it is one of the very few films he ever made in his life that was completed by himself according to his wishes. I don't know the true facts, and there are a lot of different versions of it, but at one point, Welles completely ran out of money and took a $400 cab fare to Antibes to see Darryl F. Zanuck and beg him to put some money into the film. According to different versions of the story, Welles dropped to his knees in the hotel lobby, Other versions have Zanuck being awakened at 4 in the morning and summoned down to Wells, who was sitting by the pool. But in any event, Wells was able to prevail on Zanuck to put money in the film at a critical time. Some sources say it was 75,000 in lira, some say it was 85,000 in various currencies that were literally counted in Wells's hotel room. But naturally, Wells made sure the cab fare was put on Zanuck's tab. Also, anticipating the premise of the producers, it's a virtual certainty that Wells did sell far more than 100% interest in the film during the course of raising funds for it. If published figures of $500,000 for the entire cost of the movie are accurate, it is probable that about $200,000 of that represented Wells's personal investment, which he never recouped. I very strongly feel that the meaning and myth of Orson Welles matters very, very little, and that the films are everything. For me, it's the accomplishment itself, and the rest is interesting and even occasionally illuminating, but it ultimately doesn't matter. Anecdotes in the final analysis are really just stories people tell, and as far as I'm concerned, there are no excuses necessary for Orson Welles. You don't have to say Othello is such a terrific film in spite of its production problems. It's a great film, period.